Back on my server, in Server Manager, I'm going to go to Tools, and I'm going to pull up Active Directory Users and Computers. I have my domain, the RTS Network and Local. And under that, you'll see we have our containers and our one organizational unit. Now, I know I have one organizational unit because when I click on the domain, it gives me all of the objects under the domain, and under type, only one is listed as an organizational unit. The users, computers, those are two you work with very often. They are containers. As we said, we know that because they don't have a little book inside that icon like domain controllers. So those are my containers. I'm going to just right click and I'm going to create a new organizational unit. So I'm going to go to New Organizational Unit, and I'm going to name this Sydney. Under Sydney, I have a lot of laptops and a lot of desktops, and maybe I want to apply policies differently to those. So I'm going to go to New Organizational Unit, and I'm going to create a Computers Organizational Unit. And now under Computers, I'm going to create some more child OUs, and I'm going to name one Laptops and the other Desktops. So I have this little hierarchy going on. Pretty neat. Now, you could replicate some type of structure like this for all the locations you have within your environment. I'm going to actually create some users as well. So under Sydney, I'm going to create an organizational unit named Users. And under that, I'm going to create some additional OUs for different types of users. By types, I mean responsibilities. So I'm going to create one named IT Users. And I'm going to create one named Sales Users. Now, if you want to put users behind it, that's strictly preference, what they're actually named. But you could just rinse and repeat this for, finance, marketing, all your different departments. And under IT Users, I'm going to create a new group. And I'm going to name this group Sydney IT. Well, Sydney IT Users, just to avoid any confusion. And I'm going to create a new user as well. Roger Jackson. Username R Jackson. Password we'll set. Now, I probably won't use Roger for anything, but I'm going to still deselect this user must change password at next log on because we're in a test environment. You just would not do that in production. And actually, I don't need to select anything else here. We'll just click next, and our user and group are both created. Now, I'm going to go to Roger. When I right click, add to a group. And I'm just going to type SYD and check names. And I only have one group that starts with Sydney. So Roger is now a member of that group. Where delegation comes in, I'm going to right click this Sydney organizational unit, and delegate control is the first thing in the list. When I go next, it says, who do you want to delegate to? Select users and groups. I'm going to add, and I'm going to specify that Sydney IT users. Now I have to say what I want to delegate to Sydney IT users. They can create and delete and manage user accounts if that's what I want. I can have them reset user passwords. Several of these settings relate to group policy or other type of objects. So we just decide what it is we want them to do. Resetting user passwords is one of the most commonly delegated tasks. But I'm going to leave both of those selected. And I'll just click Next and Finish. Now, that Sydney IT users can reset passwords, but only for users in the Sydney OU. Now, I could have delegated at this user's level here. I mean, it would have been the same. Just any users under the level you delegate, you have that permission for those objects. Now, I could have delegated at the domain level. There's a delegate control here, but if you delegate here, this would apply to every organizational unit that you have, every organizational unit you will ever have. So anyone delegated at the domain level, they would be able to reset passwords for users anywhere in your domain structure. You go down the hierarchy, so you want this as granular as possible. So now my only delegation is at the Sydney OU. An interesting thing though, if I right-click Sydney and go to Properties, you can't tell who was delegated what from here. You only get these 3 tabs and they are not helpful. If I click View and go to Advanced Features, it's like showing hidden files and folders basically. But once I do that View Advanced Features, if I now right-click Sydney and go to Properties, I get a lot of additional tabs that show up. One is this Security tab. So on this Security, I can click Advanced at the bottom. And here you'll see Sydney IT users, create, delete user objects. So they have the ability to do that. This is how you determine what's been assigned at what level. Very much like looking at permissions on a folder level, but we're just looking at delegated permissions here. So pretty neat overall. One other thing you do notice, I didn't mention it when I was creating my organizational units, but anytime you create an organizational unit here, there's a checkbox, protect container from accidental deletion. Notice it is checked by default. If you leave it checked, if I come back and decide I want to delete the Sydney OU, if I right click and choose delete, it says, are you sure you want to delete Sydney? Everything looks okay thus far. If I say yes, it says, nope, you can't do that. You do not have sufficient privileges to delete Sydney, or this object is protected from accidental deletion. Now, the account I'm using is a domain administrator, so I do have the privileges, permissions to delete. It's the accidental deletion. As long as you have that View Advanced Features selected, if you go to the properties of an organizational unit, an object tab is visible. On that tab, protect object from accidental deletion, you can select that and then you can select OK, and you will be able to then delete that object. So it's just, as its name implies, accidental deletion. Another step before you can delete. Now, I don't want to delete any of these OUs I just created, but if I tried to delete Sydney right now, it would actually fail because the OUs inside the Sydney OU, if I go look at any of those, they're all protected from accidental deletion. So you would have to unprotect all of those. Then you could go through and delete. Now, if you do delete an organization unit, it does delete the objects in the organization unit. Users, groups, computers are not protected from accidental deletion. So if you deleted an organization unit that had 100 users in it, you deleted 100 users. The other big consideration for your organization unit structure was group policy. I'm going to go to Tools, and in my Tools, Group Policy Management shows up. If I expand my RTS networking.local, domains, and I'm going to full screen that, and I'm going to adjust this a little bit, I can see only organizational units. So we see Sydney. If I expand that, I have the computers, that structure we created, and my domain controllers organization unit. So I could create policies, but my policies can never apply to containers. I could have them linked to and apply to these organizational units, but never would you be able to directly link a policy to like this user's container, the computer's container. Just not possible. I'm going to turn off the advanced features because it does add a lot of additional clutter to that interface and I just don't want to look at it. But that's our organizational unit and container walkthrough.